Hi, Felix. How are you doing?
Hello there. Yeah, thanks for inviting me. It's nice and hot here in Amsterdam. So it's good to record a podcast from home this time.
Absolutely. So, thank you so much for joining the podcast. And we all know you with the name of Electric Felix. I joined the e-mobility industry 4 years ago, and this is the one name that I've seen on my LinkedIn, on Twitter, everywhere. There is one guy who is really posting about e-mobility, the new chargers, what is happening in MCS, what is happening when it comes to grids, etc. So I always have been following you. So I would like to understand who is Electric Felix and how did your EV journey begin?
There were several moments because I've been using a lot of shared mobility in Amsterdam already more than a decade ago. There was a big shared fleet that was introduced to the city, and I could use it very cheaply because I had a lot of chargers nearby my house. Because Amsterdam was very early with rolling out public
Hmm.
AC charging. But what really kickstarted my Electric Felix journey, so to speak, is that I won a ride with an electric motorbike. And
Okay.
this happened in 2017. And that was the first time that I could go to Fastnet and charge up there. And it blew my mind in so many ways that it became a life changing moment because I wanted to know what was going on and how far could I take that motorbike. And I was mostly surprised also that I didn't know that it was out there. I didn't know that the motorbike existed, even
Hmm.
though I was into motorbikes. I just bought my first motorbike myself, and that was also the reason to start writing about what I saw because
Okay.
I simply wanted to share what I encountered.
But that's a really interesting thing. So you have been in the e-mobility phase now, I would say, for the last 8 years. And how it started was you said you won a ride. So it was a promotion deal or and
Yeah,
did you expect it was electric bike that your trip you're going to get?
I was subscribed to a newsletter from actually a Tesla rental company in the Netherlands. But
Okay.
the Teslas were Model S's, and they were very expensive to rent. So for me, yeah, they weren't a good alternative to the diesel cars I used to rent at the time because they were the best value for money if I wanted to drive far away. And the funny thing is that for Christmas they had this promotion where you could win a ride with a Tesla, but they also struck a deal with this Dutch guy that had his electric motorbike rental company. And
Okay.
I realized that most people are subscribed to this newsletter because they want to drive the Tesla. So let's just try to win that motorbike ride because it might be a good chance. I didn't even know what I signed up for because I didn't
Okay.
know the motorbike and everything, and I didn't know about fast charging, etc. So it was all very new.
So it was your first ever EV trip.
Yeah. So first ever that I really went outside of Amsterdam because the car sharing I've been doing was with smart cars, so they couldn't fast charge. But this motorbike, because it could fast charge, that changed my whole look into the e-mobility space because I finally realized that that motorbike, as long as I would find a new fast charger, I could then continue my trip. And after that day where I rode it to the beach and on the way back home I fast charged. And yeah, that I realized that that motorbike was already a totally feasible transport in the
Hmm.
Netherlands because of the Fastnet network, because they already had nationwide DC charger coverage. So as long as you wouldn't mind to charge sometimes, you could just ride a motorbike anywhere at all times. And yeah, I was just so surprised that, yeah, I never even heard of the brand, nothing.
Okay.
And I was really at the time, yeah, reading all these nerdy blogs to be up to date with these things. So I was really surprised yeah, and I think that even today, that maybe surprises me even more than my surprise from back then, is that most people today would still not know that those motorbikes exist. And I made a joke on
Count me in
another
as well.
yeah, I made a joke on another podcast that when I see an electric motorbike around Amsterdam today, I almost faint because it hardly happened, even now.
That's true. What was the fast charging like in 2017?
Yeah, very different because the 50 kilowatt triple charger was the norm. Yeah. So it felt fast to me back then,
Absolutely.
but imagine how much has changed within a decade. 400 kilowatt chargers are now normal, and
Absolutely.
that is in Europe. So yeah, it's wild how that changed. But yeah, it looked fast to me because, when you plug in that motorbike and in 20-25 minutes, you could be back up to 80%. So yeah, that just yeah, it just felt fast. And I suddenly had an understanding of the fastnet network because I could see the network and I could see it growing. But back then you could see many fastnet chargers where there wasn't anybody charging. And yeah, it was a completely different world from today.
Absolutely. No, no, 100% it makes sense. Um, so how long did you travel in 2017 for this trip?
Well, I rented the motorbike in 2018 and I took it to Paris because the guy who was renting them out told me about this electric night ride that was organized by a couple of fanatics,
Hmm.
and they hosted this weekend event downtown Paris to drive around with a bunch of electric motorbike geeks that were coming from all over Europe to drive there together. And yeah, I will never forget that after getting to Paris, which was already quite challenging because the charging infrastructure in Belgium and France was very different from the Netherlands back then. But what I will never forget is to be at this Parisian traffic light with like 60 motorbikes around me, and you're at the traffic light and you can just whisper to all these motorbike nerds because there is no sound in a silent
Absolutely.
city because it's the middle of the night and you're not waking anybody up and you're with this whole cloud of motorbikes. And yeah, it was just fascinating.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm trying to imagine this scenario, and yeah, indeed, it's a fascinating sight, I would say. So you're standing in the center of Paris and you're not making any sound. I mean, the people would have been quite interested to see what's happening over here.
Luckily, we drove all over the morning. So we were at close to the Eiffel Tower when it was like 9 a.m. And then you could see that a lot of people were looking around like, what is going on here? And yeah, it was also very cool that I could take that motorbike at a slow speed into the crowd. And yeah, you could just see the misunderstanding. Like people just don't understand that they see this big sporty motorbike and hardly any sound comes from it. So it's just, yeah, I think even today, most people would not believe it, especially not in France.
Absolutely. No, that's true. And to summarize what we have seen, the journey of EV chargers, back then you were having trouble in some areas where the chargers were not there. But now, if I think you have been traveling all across Europe, nowadays the situation is completely different. You do not have to think about where to charge next because there is always a charger you will find. If it's not a 22 kilowatts, then you will probably find a 15. You can even find so many right now, 300 kilowatt or 400 kilowatt chargers. So it's completely changed game, I would say.
Yeah, and imagine that after the Paris trip, I took it to Switzerland, and then I had to use a bunch of Lidl chargers, and they were actually only open when the supermarket was open because they were free to use, but only during shopping hours. So it
Hmm.
meant that I couldn't do that trip on a Sunday because in the north of France, there was this whole gap of nobody offering chargers except for Lidl, and they would shut these chargers down on Sunday. So it was, and that really triggered me to find out like why is this infrastructure so different country to country, and yeah, well, what is going on in the development, and why is Fastnet so unique? Because back then they were.
So now you have touched the point, country by country, how the infrastructure is different. And over here, I was following you that you went to China as well. So when it comes to charging infrastructure, the EV rollouts, the new latest tech for the EVs, the standardization, etc., all of these things are coming most prominently right now from China. And How was your trip over there? So I would like to understand now in this discussion what are the differences, the challenges that you saw when comparing China to Europe, especially the bigger countries like Germany or France or Netherlands, etc. But what stood out to you about their EV ecosystem in China?
Yeah, there were so many things noticeable, but let's start with the first fun moment when I was walking around Shenzhen a couple of months ago. Just next to my hostel, I found a big parking lot where a couple of people were washing their cars and stuff. And then I only noticed after looking a second time that there were actually also some chargers in the back, a bit like in the old Europe where there was a 50 kilowatt a bit hidden. But then when I walked over there, it just turned out that the further I walked, more chargers kept showing up. So in fact, I was just at a random parking lot in a Shenzhen suburb, and then there's already 4 CPOs out there offering different products in the sense that very different chargers, very different power, probably very different pricing, but no clear way to see any of it. So I was really surprised. And just walking at that parking lot, I already realized something that I could hardly believe because none of that looked very special or very new. Like maybe one CPO had just started there last year, but you could obviously see that it already had grown over time. And then I realized that, oh yeah, this is a random parking lot in Shenzhen, but I'm already looking at more chargers than any location, even in the nearby of Amsterdam offers anywhere. Like this would be the biggest charging plaza of the Netherlands, perhaps, and it's just a random parking lot in Shenzhen. So when I think China, the the one word that will instantly come into my head is scale, because you will simply like this idea. Just a couple of years ago in Europe, it was still normal to run into a single 50 kilowatt charger where I charged the motorbike.
Mhm,
And here I'm looking at a country where if you're looking at a charging location, can also be AC chargers, by the way, it doesn't have to be DC. You could this parking lot had AC chargers as well, also hidden
mhm,
in a different corner. But anyway, just the scale. Like there were 4 or 5 CPOs competing, and this wasn't what we would call a charging hub. Like there wasn't a roof, there wasn't clear signage of anything. It was just a parking lot with a terrifying amount of plugs, and definitely some operator that offered maybe 400 or 500 kilowatt charging, but most chargers looked like they were only 120 or something like this. Like you see a lot of 250 amp limited charging in China because
mhm.
so much. I would believe you if you told me that half of the charging infrastructure in China is, let's say, already 5 years old, and all of those are 250 amps limited. If you just
Mhm,
generalize, so that we would hardly call that fast charging. But the thing is that in China, EVs at scale are already so old that I could see tons of cars charging up that, first of all, I had never seen before. Second of all, they were from brands I didn't know. And then third of all, you could clearly see that they weren't charging very fast. Like people were just sleeping in their car, whatever. But
Okay.
they were just there because it was cheap, I think. Because what I found out scanning some chargers and just looking around, and in the shopping malls, I sat in all the cars to swipe around and just find
Mhm.
chargers, see what the screen tells you. Yeah, it was just yeah, absurd to see that. Yeah, it would be totally normal for AC chargers to be a bit more, a bit less cheap than the DC charge. Like cheap DC charging is everywhere. And yeah, I could also see tons of AC chargers where nobody was plugged in. They were just iced, but it didn't matter because there were still tons next to them. But yeah, clearly people already skip of a lot of AC charging because the DC charging is cheaper, at least my theory.
Wow, that's amazing. To think just, I've seen parking lots in Germany, a lot of them. But the common way of charging in parking lots, maybe 20 or 30 AC plugs are there, and maybe one or two DC chargers. So right now, still what I've seen in the bigger cities as well, in the metropoles, the parking lots are not really the locations for DC charging. So that's what really interesting to hear, because the first point you were explaining, I was thinking in my mind, okay, these will be AC charging. But then you said, no, there were some AC charging as well hidden. Okay, now that changes something completely different. And then you said, okay, there was not that fast charger, but anyways, if you're going to park, let's say if I'm going to a city, I'm going to park my car over there. Maybe I'm going to a museum. Maybe I'm going to a restaurant or something. I mean, 1 hour, 1.5 or 2 hours, I don't need the 400 kilowatts. 50 will do just absolutely fine for me. And it makes absolute sense, I would say.
Yeah, I think what was also just so noticeable is that the DC chargers that I saw, yeah, I would say 80%, maybe even 90% of the DC chargers that I have seen with my own eyes, they were like, I would say, what we in Europe would describe as a Kempower like setup, where clearly there's just satellites everywhere and there's just power somewhere else. And yeah, that is, I think, what best describes China is that, yeah, why would you ever install an Alpitronic like machine when you need to be ready for the crowd, and the crowd is simply the best served if you share. Electricity is cheap in China, but yeah, the hardware is also, I would say, sort of smartly used, and I think that is just a big part of a big key of that question.
So the smartly used part, were they heavily utilized sites? So how long were you there for, a week or 2 weeks? And I want to understand, did you see on certain days or certain times when charging sites were heavily utilized, or how was it over there?
What really surprised me was walking around also in city like Guangzhou. Um, yeah, late at night there would be tons of traffic at these sites. So you're just in a random parking lot, and yeah, there will always be, I guess, some taxi drivers. And I also saw a lot of swapping stations with not always a lot of activity, by the way. So I saw way more charging than swapping. But yeah, just the, you would
Okay.
you would just never find a site empty. Didn't matter if it was early morning or late at night, and just yeah, high traffic was the norm. And what also surprised me a lot was that in China, yeah, tons of different OEMs offer their own charging, but I guess it happened like a year ago, maybe a bit longer already. But nowadays, all these networks are sort of what we know from Tesla in Europe. They're pretty much open to all. So I could also just see that, yeah, I saw a lot of Teslas using the Xpeng chargers, or, the other way around. And
Okay.
I guess part of that has to do with the pricing strategy, because funnily enough, in China, superchargers are expensive compared to most of the other OEMs. And they're also not that.
Okay. Oh, so what is Tesla using over there as a supercharger? Are these V2 chargers or the V3s?
Yeah, I mean, it looked like what I have seen was only V2 and 3.
Okay.
But now, only recently after my trip, they finally started to roll out the new. But yeah, only the V4 stalls, because
Okay.
nowhere in the world have they done the cabinets yet. But in America, it's coming.
So I will be coming on the pricing point because I think that's very important. But before that, so that I do not forget, it was really interesting to hear that the OEMs are rolling their chargers, because this in Europe, I've only seen Tesla doing it. So nobody else does it. So if Smart was trying to do this for some time, because they were just selling their AC wall boxes to somebody who's buying a smart car, they could buy the 11 kilowatt charger, for example. Or maybe Mercedes was also doing it. But now there is some Mercedes network. But again, this is Alpitronic, but it's also open for everybody. It was never like a Tesla only experience. but you're saying that in China there were multiple OEMs following this strategy,
Yes.
and that's very interesting. So, were there other OEMs did you see that are doing similar strategy?
So funnily enough, I saw in a city like Shenzhen, I ran into several Audi charging sites.
Okay.
And I will tell you something you might not believe, but I promise you it's true. And that is that I didn't see a single Audi car charging in China at an Audi DC charger, even though I saw tons of their infrastructure. So
Wow.
that is just, yeah, to me, that is just really a telling point that they tried, but I, of course, I don't know anything about the price. I don't know much about what BEVs Audi has been trying to sell in China, but it was just, yeah, crazy to me that they were one of these OEMs that I didn't expect to see
Okay.
with their own network, but they were actually very physically present. To mention some Chinese examples, like brands like both Li Auto, but also Xpeng, and also a brand like Zeekr. They all have their own network. And let's not forget Neo, even though they focus on the swapping, they have a lot of their own chargers as well.
BYD as well?
Sorry?
BYD, were they active in it or not?
Funnily enough, I didn't see a BYD infrastructure, but of course, while I was there back in April, they did open their first megawatt chargers. But I think that happened in Beijing at the time. They are very not open about how many of these megawatt chargers are actually. I think it's mostly some dealerships where they sort of show it off. And I think they
Okay.
also have a deal with some gas stations, because I did see some example sites, but I mean, photos where they have installed those next to a gas station and stuff. But I didn't see them for myself. But it just shows you that, yeah, many brands offer their own network. And yeah, it really, you can see that these I think that one of the reasons that you build your own network is that you want to be able to promise your customers something. And you can do that if you have your own network. Then you control the full EV experience. Like, if you know
Indeed.
that you send me to your own charger, you know exactly who is already there, you know what kind of speed I will get, you can promise me pricing things, you can give me free charging because it's your own charger. There's so many things you can do because you own this infrastructure. And it really amazes me that in Europe, nobody has ever challenged Tesla on something so huge. And nowadays, if you are a smart EV driver in Europe, you can just go half price on the cost of your road trip. Doesn't matter if you go from Germany to Oslo or to Madrid. If you take a Tesla subscription for that trip, you will halve your price or maybe more by taking a Tesla subscription. And unless you drive an 800-volt vehicle, your charging experience will be okay, let's say, maybe even good. And yeah, this is just something that nobody in Europe can match because we have no actual competition. And then you look in China, and yeah, I would totally believe you if, people buying either a Li Auto car or a Zeekr or one of the Xpeng models. Yeah, they might be able to travel the whole country on their own cheap chargers. And yeah, this, right now, today, if you buy a Zeekr car in Amsterdam, the same car that I saw everywhere in China, that I hardly see here. If you drive it to Italy, Zeekr can do nothing, or I mean, they can strike tons of deals with tons of CPOs, but
Hmm.
they can do so little to guarantee that my experience to Italy will be 100% right the way they want it, because they don't do the network. So I'm extremely curious slash excited to see if a company like BYD, who is just so colossal in their own, yeah, way, if they will be one of these first companies to actually challenge Tesla on this. But maybe it's too late, I don't know.
Yeah, that will be interesting to see what BYD does. Right now, I've seen your post because you were highlighting how promotional they are right now. They're striking partnership all across Europe right now to enter the markets. I've also seen that they are becoming the official sponsor, I think, for Inter Milan. So now they are targeting as well football clubs. So that's how they want to enter the European markets with either the smaller ones. I think it's called Seagull or Dolphin. And yeah, so they are quite present and they're quite active right now to penetrate the European market. And which indeed, if you look at their product and the value it is offering, it's quite competitive, I would say, to the other European brands at the moment, what we have over here.
Yeah, and imagine if you look at a market like Spain, then already BYD was market leader in BEVs last month.
Okay.
And who knows how the year will end. But yeah, it just shows you that there's a couple of these people who are out there doing local statistics. And yeah, if you look at such a market, then none of the Europeans have ever cared to sell an interesting electric vehicle in Spain at the right price. And yeah, here come the Chinese and they just offer the right product at the right price at the right moment. And it's hard to see what anybody will come up with to counter.
So we've heard Felix's incredible journey from the first electric motorbike ride in 2017 to discovering massive scale of charging infrastructure in China. From 50 kilowatts charger being considered fast to seeing some random parking lots in Shenzhen with more charging points than one has seen in one day in a city. So it's clear that e-mobility landscape has transformed drastically, especially in China. But we have only scratched the surface of Felix China's experience. In the next episode, we will dive deep into what caught his attention. The pricing. When Felix mentioned finding 100 kilowatt DC charging for just 10 cents per kilowatt hour, while gasoline cost €1 per liter, you know we are talking about a completely different economic reality. So join us in part 2 as we explore how government policies, customer preferences, and fierce competition between Chinese OEMs are reshaping what we think we know about electric vehicles. I'm Syed Hasib, and this was part 1 for my deep dive discussion with Electric Felix or Felix Hamer. Join us in part 2.